Thank you, Mr. President. This morning I rise at a time when the teaching of history is under threat. Black History Month acts as a reminder of the power of education to challenge and dismantle systemic racism. I read that in a column written by a Post-Dispatch columnist named Antonio French. He goes on to point out that Black History Month's annual observance serves as a rallying point for those committed to justice and equality, offering a space for dialogue, reflection, and activism. This morning, I want to highlight a very important person that is a part of our nation's Black history. Her name is Marsha P. Johnson. She lived from 1945 until 1992. Marsha P. Johnson was one of the most prominent figures of the gay rights movement of the 1960s and 70s in New York City. Always sporting a smile, Johnson was an important advocate for homeless LGBTQ+ youth, those affected by HIV and AIDS, and gay and transgender rights. Marsha P. Johnson was born on August 24, 1945, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Assigned male at birth, Johnson grew up in an African-American working-class family. She was the fifth of 7 children born to Malcolm Michael Sr. and Alberta Claiborne. Johnson's father worked on the General Motors assembly line in Linden, New Jersey, and her mother was a housekeeper. Johnson grew up in a very religious family and began to attend Mount Teman African Methodist Episcopal Church as a child, and she remained a practicing Christian for the rest of her life. Johnson enjoyed wearing clothes made for women and wore dresses starting at the age of 5. Even though those clothes reflected her sense of self, she felt pressured to stop due to other children's bullying and experiencing a sexual assault at the hands of a 13-year-old boy. Immediately after graduating high school, Johnson moved to New York City with 1 bag of clothes and $15. Once in New York, Johnson returned to dressing in clothes made for women and adopted the full name of Marsha P. Johnson. The P stood for "pay it no mind," a phrase that became her motto. Johnson described herself as a gay person, a transvestite, and a drag queen, and used she/her pronouns. The term transgender only became commonly used after her death. Johnson's life forever changed when she found herself engaging with the resistance at the Stonewall Inn on June 28, 1969. There are many competing stories about what Johnson did during the raid on the Stonewall Inn, but it is clear she was on the front lines. Johnson, like many other transgender women, felt they had nothing to lose. The raid on Stonewall galvanized the gay rights movement. The first gay pride parade took place in 1970, and a series of gay rights groups, including the Gay Liberation Front, a more radical organization, and the Gay Activist Alliance, a more moderate and focused spin-off group, emerged. Johnson was also involved in the early days of both, but grew frustrated by the exclusion of transgender and LGBTQ+ people of color from the movement. She actively spoke out about the transphobia in the early gay rights movement. In 1970, Johnson founded Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, also called STAR, an organization dedicated to sheltering youth transgender and individuals who were shunned by their families. Throughout the 1970s, Johnson became a more visible and prominent member of the gay rights movement. She began performing with the drag group Hot Peaches. She attracted the attention of many, including the pop artist Andy Warhol, who included her in a series of prints in 1975 entitled Ladies and Gentlemen. In an interview Johnson did for a 1972 book, she said her ambition was to see gay people liberated and free and to have equal rights that other people have in America. She wanted to see her gay brothers and sisters out of jail and on the streets again. In another interview, she said, "As long as gay people don't have their rights all across America, there is no reason for celebration." Despite her joyous personality and ever-present smile, Johnson experienced hardship. She never let her personal setbacks stop her advocacy. In 1990, Johnson was diagnosed with HIV. She spoke publicly about her diagnosis and how people should not be afraid of those with the disease. On July 6, 1992, Johnson's body was found in the Hudson River. She was just 46. Initially ruled a suicide, many friends questioned that conclusion and suspected foul play. At the time, 1992 was the worst year on record for anti-LGBTQ violence, according to the New York Anti-Violence Project. Police then reclassified the case as a drowning from undetermined cause, but the LGBTQ+ community was furious that the police refused to investigate further and that many press outlets never even covered her death. At her funeral, hundreds of people showed up at the church. It was so crowded that people stood on the street. In 2012, the New York City Police Department reopened the case into Johnson's death. And to this day, Marsha P. Johnson remains one of the most recognized and admired LGBTQ+ advocates. Thank you, Mr. President.